thank you all for being here. Today it's about power, and it's about power and agency in the narratives. Can I just assume that everyone was there last time or read the text? Yeah, is that okay? So I don't have to go through the PowerPoint again or the memory. Okay. So what I want to start with, I really wanted to be an interactive session today, and to discuss also a bit where this series of lectures is going to, and what will be the end product. Will we write like a project together? Will we do some research together? Will we write a text together? Because the text I wrote, I hope that you can just intervene and say, okay, this is interesting, or I have some examples there, or that we can. I'm also thinking about doing this in Ghent, just present a text to colleagues and ask them to say what they agree on or what not, or what additional questions they have, and maybe this is a way of interacting and collaborating, yeah? Just seeing as a starting point somewhere, yeah? I sent the text to a friend in Groningen. She is a therapist, and she sent me this back. It's 20 minutes, so it's far too long, but I want to start with like 5 or 7 minutes of this YouTube movie, because I think it's really in the heart of what I wanted to say. So I'll try to, is it okay if we start with this? Okay.
I'm a storyteller, and I would like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the danger of the single story. I grew up on a university campus in eastern Nigeria. My mother says that I started reading at the age of 2, although I think 4 is probably close to the truth. So I was an early reader, and what I read were British and American children's books. I was also an early writer. And when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories in pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kinds of stories I was reading. All my characters were white and blue-eyed. They played in the snow. They ate apples. And they talked a lot about the weather, how lovely it was that the sun had come out. Now, this despite the fact that I lived in Nigeria. I had never been outside Nigeria. We didn't have snow. We ate mangoes. And we never talked about the weather because there was no need to. My characters also drank a lot of ginger beer because the characters in the British books I read drank ginger beer. Never mind that I had no idea what ginger beer was. And for many years afterwards, I would have a desperate desire to taste ginger beer. But that is another story. What this demonstrates, I think, is how impressionable and vulnerable we are in the face of a story, particularly as children. Because all I had read were books in which characters were foreign, I had become convinced that books, by their very nature, had to have foreigners in them and had to be about things with which I could not personally identify. Now, things changed when I discovered African books. There weren't many of them available, and they weren't quite as easy to find as the foreign books, but because of writers like Chinua Achebe and Kamaralaye, I went through a mental shift in my perception of literature. I realized that people like me, girls with skin the color of chocolate, whose kinky hair could not form ponytails, could also exist in literature. I started to write about things I recognized. Now, I loved those American and British books I read. They stirred my imagination. They opened up new worlds for me. But the unintended consequence was that I did not know that people like me could exist in literature. So what the discovery of African writers did for me was this. It saved me from having a single story of what books are. I come from a conventional middle-class Nigerian family. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator. And so we had, as was the norm, live-in domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and our old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this: she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me, as an African, was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals. I must say that before I went to the US, I didn't consciously identify as African. But in the US, whenever Africa came up, people turned to me, never mind that I knew nothing about places like Namibia. But I did come to embrace this new identity, and in many ways, I think of myself now as African, although I still get quite irritable when Africa is referred to as a country, the most recent example being my otherwise wonderful flight from Lagos 2 days ago, in which there was an announcement on the Virgin flight about their charity walk in India, Africa, and other countries. So after I had spent some years in the US as an African, I began to understand my roommate's response to me. If I had not grown up in Nigeria, and if all I knew about Africa were...
It's nice, isn't it? And I think it's very close to all what I said last time, like that you identify with, that your identity is coming out when you are confronted with the outside world. Yeah, I remember all those families that they just become, their family identity is, they see one another or their own family as a normal family, but when they are confronted with the outside world, then it's, oh, I'm an African, yeah, I'm another family, yeah. But also the danger of this single story, and also how in the literature there are the grand narratives of about being Nigerian, or in the literature of the British family, yeah, and even that she identified with this British family she never saw, because there was no other story, yeah. So I found it very nice when I saw her, and she's really impressive, because I saw her also giving a talk at the university. She's really impressive. This is an example of when I just shared my text to this woman I studied with, and she's now in Groningen and a psychotherapist, and she mailed me this back. So I think when we just start talking about the text and seeing how this fits in with what you are always doing, and then maybe also the people in Ghent, because one idea would be that next time I'll also bring some people from Ghent to interact more, that we will like enrich the text and make it more lively and have from different angles, different perspectives on this, yeah. One of the things I really would like to do is, I have given the example of blood is thicker than water and how this grand narrative impacts on us. to take like another narrative that is really far away from us, like it takes a village to raise a child or something like that, that is completely different from, and see how this is also dominant and also impacts on the people who live with this narrative. But that would mean that we need those people, yeah, to come in. And so today is really about the power we have, the power narratives have, the little and the grand stories, and how we do it, okay? So now we could do two things. I've prepared some slides about power, and I could present that to you to then just close the more official theoretical part, and then we go into interaction. Or we could start with the interaction. I could just ask, what about the text and the lecture I gave last time, and here this example, how close it is with the things that you are busy on, or what are the things that you can bring in the text. Yeah. Okay, so this is the second workshop, and we're still with the lions. One of the things I really want to talk about is when I presented this, let us be the voice of the lions, and what Isabel there then answered. I'm really curious about talking about that, and I think it's also about power, so but that we can do in a few minutes. So here she is a DJ, and it's really interesting to search her on the internet because there are a few more YouTube films, and I think it's really, actually she also referred to the Nigerian novelist that I borrowed his sentence from the lines from. So okay, so this is what the website says that we will go do today, and it's really about power, and it's not context free. So the world to person and the person to world narratives, the world to person are the grand narratives, the person to world are what the little stories we make, yeah. And so you already know that the ones we undergo and the other ones we talk. But as I also touched in the main lecture, not every story can be told everywhere to everyone. And I think it's very true today if you look, for instance, at Russian-Ukrainian situation. Yeah, so what you can tell in a certain place to certain people in a certain context is really, you cannot just tell everything. Yeah. So there are issues of power here, and I think it's very important to talk about them. And I see three: tellability, tellorship, and then intersectionality. So that I want to discuss with you. But first, I want to make the distinction between the grand narratives and the little stories a bit more detailed than I did in the first lecture. It has to do with how we look at language. Yeah? In the grand narratives, we think about narratives reflect reality. For instance, if you ask someone in a questionnaire or in an interview to answer your question, you just ask a question in the questionnaire or an interview, and you get an answer, then you think that the answer reflects reality. Yeah? The reality. Yeah? Whereas on the other part, you think that the narratives make reality because you are there and the person is talking to you, yeah? And maybe when the person was talking to someone else, the story might be different, yeah? One of the things that I always remember, and I told you last time, I have two adopted children, two adopted sons, yeah? And I had to go to a psychologist because they screen you, yeah, to see whether you're a good parent, yeah. And so they looked for me for a special psychologist that I did not teach because, yeah, if it was one of my students, it would be very strange. Yeah? So they wanted me to go to a woman, and she, I will never forget. So I drove to her house, and her practice was in her garage, yeah, and it was like an we call it in Dutch fermette. I don't know how yeah, I see the Dutch people say, how would we explain that to our balloon? It's like, you know, this old farmhouses, yeah? But you make them new, but they look like the old farmhouses, yeah? So, yeah, but it's new, and it's a typical style in Flemish building, and now we all laugh with it because it was very popular, but now people don't like it anymore, yeah? And it's also full of all these very specific things. Now, in this garage, which has a form like this, yeah, she opened the door, and I saw on her table things like baby massage, Zen therapy, yeah? And she was dressed in a long skirt with sandals and her hair on. And I was so much aware that who she was, who she looked like, and where her house was really influencing my story. If she asked me, how do you think about parenting? Yeah? And I didn't lie. I was honest. But I really felt the influence of her asking me these questions. And we made a kind of reality that was true. But when this woman had been living in a loft, and she had wearing panties and high heels, and she was like another kind of woman, the story would be very different. Yeah, it would also be true, but different. Yeah. So here we say that in the left part we say that the narrative reflects reality. Yeah, and in the other part we say it's more the narrative makes reality, yeah? And I still remember very clearly what I told her, yeah? So it's a different, and as we will see, because this is really interesting, I think. Yeah, sorry, this is, it's not either or. There is some truth in both the left and the yeah? So it's not that if you use questionnaires, it doesn't reflect reality at all. Of course, there is a lot of reality in answers in interviews and questionnaires, but it's interesting to also look at it the other way. So the grand narratives and the little stories, you know the difference. On the left side, you say that lives are constructed by pre-existing forms of discourse and narration. So if you just saw the YouTube film, you see that the English kind of family, the blue eyes, the snow, the weather, yeah, these are all really impacting on her, yeah. So it's like pre-existing, it's in the literature, and I give the example of the happily ever marriage, of the blood is thicker than water, yeah. So there's all these grand things, they really influence us, yeah. Another example that I can give is I have the honor to be part of the Royal Academy of Science, yeah. So it's, and I remember, so every month there is a meeting on Saturday, and the people in this, why I'm a member of this academy is because I'm a woman and look or listen young. Because all the people there are the really old men, yeah, and so they had to have more women and younger people, and so they are like ex-ministers and really distinguished people. Okay, so we meet on Saturday morning. And it's really like every time I'm there, my imposter syndrome blows, yeah. And so I remember now in January, we had this online New Year's reception where I had to give a speech as dean, because I'm also the dean of our faculty. And so what I did is I tried to surprise people who did a very nice job last year, and I had those kind of I don't know how to call it, but things on, and also lights around me, yeah. And I then surprised them, and we made a movie of them, and everyone was very happy, yeah, because the dean said, you're doing a good job in this kind of fancy way, yeah. And then the next day, this was on a Friday afternoon, and the next day I was at this Royal Academy. And then I thought, oh, if anyone would ever see this movie as me as a dean with the lights. So, you know, the context is really, really, really important, yeah. And the fit of a person in this grand narrative, in this pre-existing form, sometimes you really feel that you don't fit in a particular context. Yeah. So I think it's. I give this example just to show that all of us, we feel at some point this grand narrative of academia, for instance, yeah, that we have to behave and we have to be, we have to publish and we have to be serious and we have to, and of course we have to do all these things, but you know, you feel this really, it's somewhere out there, people expect you to be like this, On the other side, we are also agentively constructing our lives, and for instance, by being such a dean, who surprises people with these things on it, you also change like the academia and the culture, and that's why it's important that there are women and younger women, and so because there is a kind of change. So there is the grand narrative, but you are also constructing in a way, by deviating from this grand narrative, a different story. Another difference is that we see language as very transparent, because we think that if we use words that everyone understands the same thing of the words, where there you say, no, it's messy and fragmented. I told you a lot about all these inconsistencies last time, that people are very inconsistent, and so it's more unfolding at the moment, it's ongoing, it's not really finished, so people use language in a different way, it's not always that transparent and clear what you want to study, For instance, people in medicine, they say that a lot of clients now come to them and say, I have a depression, or my husband is autistic, my youngest child has ADHD, So and we then think that people understand that we understand the same, but of course, what is a depression, what is autistic, what is, So it's really important to check what language means to and what concepts mean. So the grand narratives we undergo, I think that is something we elaborated on the last time, and then on the other side, the little stories, we are agentic and we use language to create reality. And here are the words that I used for the title of today. So the world to person fit and the person to world fit. So the world to person is more like we undergo the world, and the person to world is more we make, or we are agentic in making it. Remember also that I used I did it my way kind of paradox, that if you look from the grand narrative, we all do the same all the time, we grow up, we get a diploma, we get children, we get married, we get children, we get divorced, and blah, 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 and then, but if you ask people at the end of their lives to just summarize their lives in one sentence, they all say, I did it my way, And so the agency that is from the little stories, because we all think that we reinvented life, and we did it different from all the others, but everyone thinks that they do it different from others, so there's a kind of paradox. But that's really, I think, what we are talking today about power and agency, So we know we undergo the grand narratives and we do what is expected from us, but on the other hand, we feel agentic, And this is something I think is very important in clinical practice or in teaching or in everything, that to how you can work with this agency, how you can feel. Pierre?
I don't know if it's the right moment to raise this question. So you can
no, sure.
But here you speak about the grand narrative of society and then the little narrative. And first of all, is it the little narrative of individuals, of couples, of family? And also it seems that for me there is an intermediate that is very important. It would be the kind of grand narrative of family. Because we can often see that family have their own story, their own heroes, their own alleged great impacts, and the fact that in this family people should go to the university, in this family men are studying engineering and blah blah blah, or maybe medicine and this type of thing. But my clinical impression is that actually people are sometimes much more constrained by the grand narrative of their family, in which there are no actor. It's family to person, maybe not word to person, but great family to person, and certainly not the person to family or person to the world. But they are much more constrained by this grand family narrative than by the cultural grand narrative.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. You're born in this family where music, everyone plays music, or headaches are a real problem, or back pain is a problem, or people are always volunteering and doing kind of jobs like teachers and carers and things like that. Yeah, and that's also why we often work with genograms and to see what, and it's also close to family secrets, because families also have secrets. Those the bastards or the bad guys or the bad women or things that have happened. Someone in psychiatry has been in psychiatry for a while, or so all this kind of secrets. I think it's true. It's true. It's very true. That maybe it's not, or certainly not only the grand narratives, but also on the intermediate level in between the family narrative. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, when people sometimes ask me, when we, with my adopted sons, but also when we do research on adoption it's always seen like it's the second best, because people first try to have children on their own, yeah, and then if it is not working, they try donor or they do adoption. Yeah? And then I sometimes asked, what is the positive thing about adoption? And that comes in like a positive thing, that you don't have this constraint of being in, because you start from the difference, yeah? Like my sons, they're black, and I remember once we were at the swimming, we went swimming, and there were still small boys. So there is this the big room where you can undress, yeah, together with the children. And this feeling that someone is staring at your back, and you feel that someone is staring at you. So I was undressing myself and helping the kids, and then I felt that someone was, and so I turned like this, and there was a woman, she said, sorry, I'm just looking at you, and this boy, you are the same, but that's not possible. And so it's like the freedom of being different and starting from the difference, yeah, it's very, it gives air. You know what I mean in an adoptive family, because there's not this constraint of your father was a musician and I'm a musician and you will be a musician too, yeah. Or be careful because we are very easily sick, and you have to be things like that. I think it's true. Yeah, it's nice that you see it. Somewhere in between. And would you think it's more like the left? It's not that. Right, okay. It's more like the left or the right, or is it also in between?
For me, it's a narrative that is as the most impacting, as the most coercive. Mm-hmm. They really build in the families. Mm-hmm. And there are stories the family tells about themselves and to themselves. And it's really what it's defines as the most constraints on the definition of the identity of the people within the family. Mm-hmm. It's really difficult to, you're the black sheep. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's really well portrayed in the last Disney movie, Encantado. Yes, about this family. I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I haven't seen it. Yeah.
Okay, but it's But on the outside, it's really glamorous. They all have special magical gift that they receive when they start to be teenager and blah 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 blah. But this is only facade. Within the family, there is secret, there is hidden thing. People are not happy, although they look really happy from the outside. And it's all the evolution of the way they present themselves to the village. It's very special in the village because of the very special status in the village because of the way they present themselves. And you should look at the movie.
I will do that. Yeah, I will do that. But now you're very much stressing the oppressive idea of the family stories. I also think there is like a facilitating role of family stories. If I think about the families we've been studying, the family talk, the talking family that people do, you also create like an identity that is also important in terms of attachment and being connected, and all those stories. Like people at family dinners say, like aunt blah 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 always said. So that I also think that there is. I can see the oppressive part of family narratives, but I can also see the more, the identity creating. Stefan?
If I may, I'm very happy you now mentioned the word identity. I think mentioned it because I don't see it on the two sides of the narratives, but I see application of the notion of social identity with all the things that come with it. And I was wondering if you also see the role of the narratives in emphasizing similarity within families, emphasizing differences with others. Is that something which you also...
Absolutely. I think that it's not here, but it's on one of the other slides that you create how you want to be seen. That's also what you said, Pierre, how you want to be seen, and also how you fear to be seen, because as a family, and sometimes you create the stories because, and I think in the movie you mentioned, Pierre, this is really, so it's very close to identity, it's absolutely, it is not here, but it's on one of the other sides, but I think it's very, like in the YouTube movie we saw, your identity of being an African, is Oliver kind wasn't there so much as long as she was in Nigeria, but then she came to the VS, the United States, and then she became an African, So in the confrontation or in the stories that you tell, there is it's really, really important. Yes, nice. Other thoughts about that?
Maybe we can consider that there are several levels, and at each level that we have both the grand narrative and the little stories. So I mean that would happen for the individuals, but also at the family level and at the cultural level or society or community level. And I think that there are, for example, interesting works in cultural psychology documenting the fact that in some cultures people are very open to deviation from the norms, so deviation from the grand narrative, and so it's even seen like an advantage to be able to deviate from the norms, and those cultures are more creative and more open to individual differences, but in some other cultures there is no way to deviate from the grand narratives, and we can also apply this kind of critique at the family level. We know that some family systems are closed, and those are others are more open, and I think it's the same also for individuals who are more open to assume that they can be different or something like that, And I think that it's different to be an individual in a family system which is open to differences between the members of the families, in a culture that tolerates that. And so I think that we can apply this kind of...
Absolutely. One question I have with that is, if you think about, for instance, the LGBTQI people, because you can say some individuals are more open or some families are more open, but this is not a choice, yeah? This is, you are born in a body that is not that doesn't match your gender identity, for instance, or you are, the grand narrative of heteronormativity doesn't fit your, but it's not a choice. I'm a bit also with this power thing, yeah? As long as you say, okay, they're more open to it and you have the choice of, you can choose between different narratives or different identities or different, yeah. It's different, I think, than when you have the norm and then you deviate from the norm, not by choice, but just by birth, yeah. So I wonder how these two, because there is also a power issue in that, yeah. So the lesbian couples we talked about, that's not their choice of having a baby together with two women. That's not a choice. Yeah? Yeah. So I also think in the family narratives or in the other grand narratives that we have to distinguish between like the degrees of freedom you have to deviate from the norm by choice, yeah, and the degrees of freedom you have to deviate from the norm, but not by choice, by given. Yeah.
Based on what you're saying as well, I think this is important to talk about community. Some people, like you said, you took the example of LGBTQ person. If this person fits to the norm of the family, maybe he or she might find community where they can build this identity and then be able to confront the family as well to say, okay, I'm different.
Yeah.
Would you accept me or reject me?
The family of choice. Eh? It's the concept of family of choice that you can, and this is also, I think, I mentioned that in the first lecture, that the nature of the parent-child relationship is often seen as not voluntary. Yeah, it's you are born in this family, so this is your family. Yeah, but if you learn from other families, then you see that you can also question this, because it's also an expectation that we have on the basis of the blood is thicker than water. Yeah, it's blood, so you have to feel something for one another, and you have to love your mother, and you have to love your child, and whatever. Yeah. Whereas this family of choice idea is a bit different, yeah? It's more that there is some degree of freedom there too, yeah. Yes, very interesting. The identity thing we come back to, but this one, the in-between, I think I'll think about it, because it's really true that on the level of the community, the family, the couple, that there are other stories. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we just finish that. So there is the existing narratives, yeah, and little space for alternatives, and then there is more the agency, responsibility. The responsibility, I want to stress, it's also on one of the other sides, because it's very close to what we were talking about now. There is some kind of idea that you can deviate from the norm, especially in a country like Belgium. Yeah, it's even legally it's possible. Yeah, you can marry someone from the same sex. You can adopt a child if you are two women or two men. You can do that, but it's your responsibility. So if it's not going well afterwards, just don't complain, because it's your choice. And that is the kind of choice I'm not comfortable with, yeah? What kind of choice? It's the same with divorce, yeah? It's possible to divorce, guilt-free divorce, yeah? But if we allow people to divorce, of course I want people to, I'm in favor of allowing people to divorce. then we have to be, the consequence is that we also help them and that there is some caring for them and for the children and blah, 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 and that we have good trajectories so that they can divorce in a good way. But that is something then that people say, they can do it, but it's their choice of responsibility. Yeah, you can adopt a child, but if you have problems afterwards, and then with adoption it's actually quite extreme, because if you want to adopt a child, you have to go through this information sessions, and they say, mind you, because they have attachment problems, they have health problems, they have all kind of problems, they might have mental problems, yeah, and then you do it anyway, and then afterwards there is a problem, and then people are just making themselves very small because they say, yeah, they warned us, and if you then try to look for proper help, it's very difficult to find a psychologist who is really specialized in adoption, for instance. And that is because there's something like, we warned you beforehand, you did it anyway, so it's your responsibility. Yeah. So there is something, if we legally approve and say you can adopt, then we have to live with the consequences, I think. Yeah, Isabel?
I'm not sure this only applies to non-normative choice, because also it concerns normative choice. For example, in normal parenting, now having a child is a choice, a life project, because you can make the choice of having children. And so if you have children, so do not say that you burn out, because that was your choice to have 1, 2, 3, or 5 children. And so I think it's also a cultural way to a society of individualism, which puts on all people all responsibilities of making choice, either they are normative or non-normative.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's also why I'm I have my doubts about prevention often, and especially the combination of prevention and solidarity for people. And I always give the example of when I was a young child, then they say you have to drink milk and eat apples for your teeth, yeah? And now if you go to the dentist and they have to pull out teeth, it's no longer reimbursed, yeah? Because, of course, the more you stretch the individual responsibility, yeah, the less you have solidarity, yeah? So it's true, it's about individual solidarity, it's about individual responsibility. And I think I felt it a lot with the families we studied, but it's true that being a family, everything is a choice now, yeah?
Because even individualistic culture, you can decide what is your own trajectory.
Yeah.
And so if you decide what is your trajectory, it's freedom, yeah, but you also endorse a huge responsibility
Yeah.
to every kind of direction.
Yeah.
You will take.
Families with a child with a disability, for instance, Down syndrome, they also feel it very, very heavily, yeah? Because they always are asked, didn't you know it in advance? Yeah? Didn't you have a test? Because it's also a kind of prevention. You test, and then if you choose to have the child born, then you can explain it. And that's also something about adoptive children that is very different. And because one of the 2 boys I adopted, he is mentally retarded. Yeah? But for adoption, they see it like, you did a good job having this boy here, because over there in Haiti, it would be even more of a problem. So we get lots of help actually for him out of this idea, oh, this poor black guy, yeah? And it's different because when it had been my biological son, I think the responses from people would be very different, yeah? So the narrative, and it's very strange, but the narrative sometimes, like I have with my children all these talks about adoption is the same as colonialism. Yeah, it's we white people taking those poor black boys, coming here to give them a proper education. Yeah, and so that's how we talk about adoption. And then sometimes I feel like small like this, and then they say to me, oh, but Mama, for us it's very good, because we are here, we're safe, we have food. So in principle we're against, but for us it's heaven, yeah? But if you think about adoption this way, it's really true. It's colonialism. It's just, and it's also very egocentric, because I wanted children, so I adopted them. But the outer world, the story outside, is more like, you're a very good woman, taking care of these poor children, and then one with all this, because he has multiple handicaps, yeah? So that's very strange, because then if you go to get help, they're there and they say, of course we will help you, yeah? So it's the opposite, it's the other narrative. Yeah? But individual responsibility, I think if we talk about power, it's a really big one. And I can see it's not only about the little stories and the deviating stories, it's about being a family is a choice now. And it's also, we wrote something about that, because it's very strange, because what we call reconstituted families, there are not more reconstituted families now than there used to be like 2 generations ago. But 2 generations ago, it was out of necessity, because a lot of women, they died when they gave birth to children, and so they were replaced, yeah, because you had to have a mother. And so now it's more seen as a choice, and then it was a necessity. And it is as long as it was a necessity, nobody cared about what is the impact on the child, and shouldn't we study this kind of families? Because you just took another mother and say, okay, this is a normal family again. Yeah? No. And because now we shifted from necessity to choice, and then this, oh la 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 la, but what does it do with the children? And we have to, so you really see also in the kind of research questions we ask this shift from, it's more an individual choice. Yeah. So I can see that also, because now you have birth control, that in this shift also, parenting becomes an individual choice, yeah? Whereas...
Yeah, I just wondered if you ever looked at women who became pregnant with no choice at all. So if they had been raped, for example, and then they could not have an abortion, if you ever looked at that kind of narrative where you can't say that she had the choice to have that child with actually.
Yeah, we didn't do that, but it's interesting. It's interesting. We did have studies with women waiting for an abortion, but we never... I think, Jan, in your study, there were a few parents who said that it was not really a choice to have the child, or that there were a few.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's very difficult to talk about, but this is very taboo. I remember, it's a long time ago, but I remember even that there was a boy and the mother talked about the boy in such a way, because he was never meant to be in his presence, yeah? And that we all were like, oh, and still getting, what to do with in such a...
She didn't choose for it.
No. No.
There is also the case of a ECD woman in Syria.
Yeah.
She was a sexual slave with their child, and now rejected by their community unless they abandon their child.
Yeah.
It's really...
Yeah, I also think about, 2 years ago I went to Bosnia to have this, because we teach our children about World War I and II, but all the Muslim children, they don't identify with the world wars, and the war in Bosnia is really something that they do identify with. So we were in Bosnia for 1 week to learn about this war and how we could incorporate this war in the history classes in schools. And there we also talked with children, but they are already grown up because this was the early 90s, who were the product of rape by the enemy soldiers, and this is it's really heavy. Very heavy. Yeah. It's an interesting thing, but I think it's very difficult to study. Okay. Maybe just to finish this, one other difference is that there is some continuity in the narratives, like the marriage plot is going on for ages, the happily ever marriage. And also the blood is thicker than water, that's something that is generation by generation, it's passed on, and whereas the others are more unfinished, evolving, non-structured, everyday, mundane, so it's a different kind of story. And then I think also what I started with, that you have the narratives in response to a question, and this is something really difficult if you study family narratives, because you always are there as a researcher asking questions, and then the narrative you get is different from the ones that they that you are talking about, Pierre, that they talk with one another, the family narratives that they, the talking family that they do. Okay, this was what I presented last time, so this was more on a general level. Now we were more in, and this red line was supposed to also say that it's not either or, but that's a lot of, and that's also what you said, that it's what I told in my lecture last time was that being an uncategorical researcher is much too categorical, because it's not either or. And that Bamberg is a nice author in this, and he also says, obviously, both lenses in isolation present only a partial and incomplete picture of the agency direction of it between person and world, because it would be erroneous to deny the person any agency and responsibility, he writes also, in his or her construction of the world, as it would be ill-fated to endow the person with ominous powers and deny the relevance of pre-existing discourses and master narratives. So it's both, it's clearly both. Now, maybe to just go a bit further into the discussion, I think there are three interesting aspects. There are more, but these are the things that I wanted to stress. In this idea of power and control and agency and choice also, the tellability, the tellorship, and then the social location. The tellability is really about how tellable is a story, how is the story, can the story to be told? And so it really stresses that not everything can be told to everyone, everywhere. Remember what I started with the interview that I once did for the adoption, that how you frame the story is really different, what you say, what you omit. And this is really also with children, because sometimes we think children, the stories of children are more incomplete or less accurate than the ones from adults. Two things I wanted to say about that. If you ask a child, if you ask an adult, if I would ask you, what did you do yesterday? You would probably start with, oh, yesterday I woke up very early, and then I had breakfast, I went to so you have like this scheme of the day, you do it in a chronological way, If you ask a child, what did you do yesterday, then they say, we ate French fries, and so the accuracy is similar, because it's true that they ate French fries, as it is true that you woke up early. But the things that you omit and they omit are different, because if I ask you, what did you do yesterday, you would not say, I went 3 times to the toilet, or I brushed my teeth twice, or I didn't brush my teeth, You wouldn't say that. So you also omit a lot of things, because you think that it is not interesting to me, that it doesn't interest me that you went 3 times to the toilet, yeah? And so children do the same. They omit things because but in what they say, they are accurate as we are, but they also omit things, yeah? And the second thing is about children and narratives. There is this, I don't know whether it has ever been published, but there was a study that asked children, I don't know whether you know this in here, but in Flanders, all children have to go through medical examination. So you go with your class to medical examination. You go with the whole class, and then there is the nurse and the doctor, yeah, and the nurse, she just weighs you, and yeah, and then you go to the doctor who does anything. And so there was this experiment where the nurse, when the children had to go one by one to the doctor, yeah, in the cabinet, and then they came out. And when the children came out, the nurse asked, the doctor asked you to put off your pants, your underwear, yeah. The doctor didn't do that, but 17 out of the 20 children said yes. And the thing is that the children think that adults don't ask stupid questions. And you have to think about yourself. If you go to the doctor because you feel something here, and the doctor asks, do you also feel it there? Then chances are very high that in the next week you will think, I do feel it like there. Because you think that this doctor is only asking you intelligent questions, yeah? And there is a kind of hypothesis that if you have something here, that it will also be here, yeah? And so if you, and that's also the case with children, yeah? If you ask a very, not an open question, but in a certain direction, did the doctor ask you to put out your underwear, yeah? Then they say yes, because they think it's an intelligent question, and you wouldn't ask it if it was not true, yeah? So that's very, actually how children tell stories, it's on the one hand very similar to how adults ask it, because they omit things like we do, yeah, but they don't have this chronology or the structure, yeah. And on the other hand, they're very prone to what they think you are, that you are an intelligent person, yeah. But the same holds for us. If we are doing an interview with people, they think we only ask intelligent questions, yeah. So they also respond to the questions we. So this is about not everything can be told to everyone everywhere, and small talk and small stories or small things like going to the toilet are sometimes considered unimportant. If you analyze small talk, it's also very context dependent, or because in families, for instance, people will say, I will tell you later, but the thing is, and they say something, yeah? There is a lot of talking about, I will tell you later, of you remember last time, yeah? So it's really in context and it's evolving, yeah? Also about friends call one another or they text one another, yeah? Breaking news, but I tell you later, yeah? So things like that. There is no linear organization. There's not really a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's very unpredictable, yeah. Full of inconsistencies, context and circumstances are important. It's a lot about roles and routines and cultural scripts, and so that is also why, and this for me is a really, really important thing about narratives and power. It's including, but it's also excluding. Yeah, if you do not know the rules or the role or the routines, or then a story can be very excluding. Yeah, if you are somewhere at a reception, nobody talks about it. It's difficult to enter a group. Yeah, because you're not part of this ongoing conversation. You don't know how to break into this conversation. So it can also be very excluding. Or if you are entering the conversation and everyone silences, yeah, so it can also be very excluding. And then the social function of storytelling, and the fun in itself creates connection. And that's also about its family narratives that you mentioned, Pierre. I also think, because you really focused on the oppressive side of family narratives, which is certainly there, but there's also like the fun and the storytelling in itself, making a narrative, making an identity as a family, is also something that we invest a lot in, and families come together and talk about experiences when we were children, or laughing about our parents, or about Aunt or Uncle Huppel the Pup, or And then also one of the things that I think is very interesting is that there are also always multiple tellers. It's like the story I tell to now, here, it's me telling, but it's also you listening, and it's every sign you give, it's influencing my story. So you're also telling the story with me, and it's close to tellorship, and by tellorship I will also say also the invisible people, For instance, when we do mediation, when people want to divorce, they go to a mediator to discuss what they, and we often ask who is in this room, because there are only the two people, but there are lots of other people there, There is the mother, his mother, who said, and you can see, don't give in to this one, because it's our money, Don't give in. So his mother is there, Of course, the children are there, and then the school is there, and then, So if we ask them who is present here, who is influencing the story, it's a lot of people, So the authors of the story are multiple, always. Yes, Stefan?
The question about that, how changeable is tellability? And I think, for example, on changes to history, and things that can be told now are totally different from things that should be told when I was young or in my family. But also on a shorter scale, for example, I'm at the stage where my children have boyfriends, and then they become part of the family, and so how changeable becomes the tellability when you have changes within the family composition due to new people arriving. Not people who are too young to participate.
Yeah, that's a nice story, a nice question. The first thing that comes to mind, we did research with reconstituted families, and it's very strange because they have a common future but no common past. So they have to, the question is, how do they build a new story? Because they have their own stories, their own past, and now they come together building. And the thing is that what we saw is that actually they did the same as normal families, but in more speed, in a high time. So what they did is start doing things together, creating history, and very, very intense level, going shopping together, going to the football game, so being there together and doing things together, So creating a past, That was very, and then they also honored their own things. That's also so, because they want to not forget or replace their old history with a new one. But the thing is that they were very intensively creating this new reality, And sometimes they kind of regressed in a developmental path, because when this happens, when the children are like 15 or 17, if there's no divorce, then the children and parents don't do a lot of things together. For instance, the children go shopping with their friends and things like that. But in this reconstituted family, they kind of regressed, to the level where they were 5 or 7, and then. But they did it on more intense, and so they had to catch up this thing, creating. And there also narratives can be including and excluding, because I remember from my own, I'm living in a reconstituted family, and I remember the first time we went on holidays with everyone, which was a big autobus, that every night the oldest daughter of my partner would start telling stories from when she was little and how it was in their family, and I found it very kind of alienating, yeah, because we were all together creating this new, but it's threatening also in a way, yeah. So she wanted to make, I think, very clear that this past that she shared with her father was very dear to her, and that she wanted it to not to be forgotten or to be replaced by something. Yeah. So during the day we could do very nice things. We went swimming together, and canoeing, and things like that. So we created a new reality. But every time when we sat down for having a meal at night, she would start telling her history, of their history, yeah? And I felt it like it was very excluding, yeah? And that was, I think, also the function the story had, yeah? So my idea would be yes, but it's both, yeah? Honoring the past, I think we read it in an article, it was honoring the past and then making new history, yeah? It's very interesting how they do that, actually. Yeah, and then the social location we come to. But of this tellership, so it's like authorship, yeah? Who is the author of an article? Who is the teller of the story? Yeah? And the second sentence says there are multiple co-tellers, yeah, and it's not like one having the active role and the other having the passive role, because having the passive role is also really being part of the story, yeah. To have to tune in with this last example, she would not tell the story if I was not there, yeah, because I was there and I didn't intervene in this story. I wasn't even part of the story, but me being there was really the reason why she would tell this story, yeah? So I'm not the passive, I'm having an active role in that, yeah? Although I didn't say anything yet.
I don't know, but she can also share like this story to include you in the story. You're not part, but I say you, but in
Yeah.
example, you're not part of this memory, but now you are aware
Yeah.
of this memory, so you can share it with her, maybe, I don't know, talk with her about those memories she shared. So I think it could be excluding, but also including.
Yeah.
The history you're now aware of.
It's very nice you say that, because for me it felt like excluding, but it's really an alternative hypothesis that is worth exploring, absolutely. That she wanted to share it, absolutely. But for here the thing is that just being in the room, or even not being in the room, but being invisibly in the room, yeah, all of these have a meaning, yeah, they are always there. We did with Leslie also quite some research about what people are thinking of when they are interacting with one another, and you see that a lot of the thoughts go to, for instance, when we are talking here, a lot of you might think, oh, I might not forget to get some bread because the bread is gone at home and I have to catch my train, and so all this kind of things. So even now our families are still here in this conversation, yeah. So and that seemed to be the case in a lot of conversation. So it's very complicated to see who is telling and who is listening and how they all intervene with that, yeah. So all interaction partners matter, including the invisible ones. And I think it's a nice idea to sometimes see who is present here and who is saying what, yeah. And it's also like the narrative, then the family narrative that's coming in, yeah, through these invisible interaction partners. Here is a sentence, Stefan. How the world is co-construction points to how the tellers wants to be understood, wants to be seen, fears to be seen. Yeah, so it's identity construction, explore the self at the level of the talked about as a character within the story. So it's really about how I want to be seen, how I sometimes I have a different lecture on that. It's about Václavík and so the first axiom, maybe you know that, Ed, for how you present yourself. And then I often say it like, you think about what shall I wear, yeah, because now with my food, I was really thinking this morning, I often wear jeans now because it's very comfortable for me, but I say, maybe no jeans for today because I have to go there and then, so it's a bit too casual. So you think about that, how I want to be seen, yeah? Think about me with the lights I want to be seen differently in my faculty than I want to be seen at the academy, yeah? So we're really about, and the story is also how I want to be seen. The sentence I always say to illustrate that is, I really like to be here today to give this lecture to you. Yeah? So what I say and how I say it is completely different because the way I give this lecture now, it's really, I want to be seen as an enthusiastic woman who has something to tell and blah, 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 yeah? So the way you talk is really, how the story develops, it really says a lot about how you want to be seen. And it's not only about content, but it's also about how you do that, yeah? Language in all its aspects, yeah. Narrative's always an interaction, and so we build on what we said last time, and we will build on this in the future. So it's always in interaction, and especially in families, yeah, they have a past, and what you say roots in the past and also has something to do with the future. One of the things I always remember, and I talked with Jan a lot about that, is that parents often do things or don't do things because of the future, yeah? For instance, when my oldest son was 7, his teacher said to me, you have to your supervision, you have to supervise him doing homework and things like that. And I said, no, I won't, because I don't have any patience and I want to be his mother in 20 years. I really love my child, yeah? And I don't want to argue with him every day, yeah? And I knew it was an intelligent boy and he would survive his first year of school, yeah? And he eventually did, and we still are a nice mother-son in a nice mother-son relationship. Yeah, so I really think that people, this being rooted in the past and in the future, yeah, and Jan, you call it the feedback and the feed forward, yeah? You have the feedback, but also you have the feed forward, yeah? That's also part of the interaction, yeah? You want to be loved and to be seen as, and your identity building to how you will be in the future. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to share with you is this social location. We talked about the intersectionality. We talked about that a lot last time because, yeah, I think the power, if you are white, middle class, well-educated, yeah, the power you have in telling stories is completely different from when you deviate from that in any or especially in more than one aspect. And I also think that the YouTube film that we started with shows that quite nicely. And here, this individual responsibility, I also want to, because this is something that I didn't say last time, but we talked about it a couple of minutes ago, and I think, Isabel, it's very true what you say, that it's not only if you deviate, but also if you, the more we see our lives as people as being in control of what you choose in your life, yeah, whether it's a career or it's a child or it's a marriage or it's, and you can choose whatever you want, yeah. The world is on our feet, like we say, but it comes with an individual responsibility. Yeah. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say. Maybe we can now just we already started, but yeah, maybe one more thing. So the idea I had was to just send the text to a lot of people and ask for their comments and then adapt the text so that, for instance, now with the individual responsibility, with the family narratives, with the identity, there are topics that I can elaborate on and put more in the picture so that it's evolving, yeah. And then, because Jan also stressed it quite a lot, that the implication it has for like psychotherapy, for education, for prevention, is also something very nice. So maybe it's also a good idea to have some like case studies or something we can work on what does that mean for prevention, what does that mean for psychotherapy, how is it applicable, what can we do with that, do you have counter examples of things that you think is very difficult or things that you say maybe here is a clue that we can, yeah, to elaborate the text on that so that it's not only the text and we are all owner of the text, but then also have some case studies on how it's, yeah, what purpose it can serve, yeah. That was an idea I had, and maybe we can also work on a project then. That would be a dream, like
I was wondering also in what you presented about the way these different stories construct ourselves, and now we use maybe this story to construct ourselves. In the process of constructing this story, sometimes they can be very dramatic events that totally change the story, and something that it's really evident presently now. It's, for instance, what's happening in Ukraine, where you can see that I have the impression that the storytelling about the family has totally changed with incredible social constraint, where the grand narrative is there, where if you are a man, you basically have no choice in becoming a fighter.
Yeah.
And if you're a woman, you have basically no choice as fleeing away and taking care of the children.
Yeah.
And here you can hear, for instance, feminists yelling, "Oh, what is this? It's very traditional and very patriarchal way to see things." But I was listening to testimony of men in Kiev. For instance, this man was an architect and he was saying, "Well, a couple of weeks ago, if you would ask me if I would be able to kill a man, I would have said no way. Now it is different." And now you could feel the guy was really lost between what was his value, what was now the role he was in, and you cannot help but feeling that the individual has really lost not only his liberty, his free will, but also is kind of obliged to change his value. And it's really, I think it's questioning. Personally, I'm part of the old generation that had to do a military service, and I opposed to that, so I was a conscientious objector. And I said, well, what would happen if I was this man in Kiev now? Would I be able to resist the pressure of society that imposed me to become a fighter or not? So there might be also interesting things to do with
absolutely.
people who will arrive other than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the Flemish television, there was one reporter who made a film about how people say goodbye at the train station, not knowing whether they will see one another ever again. It's really very hard. It's really hard. And also knowing that for us, for generations, this will impact the children of these children. That will impact how the Russians and Ukrainians think about one another, because they're so close. And so you know now that this will, like we saw it in Bosnia, that the Serbs and the Bosnians, they live in the same village, and the way they interact with one another is completely different and still has this impact of what happened there and then, and so it changes the identity of a nation, the identity of men and women, the identity of families. I do think it's really changing identities, yeah? And it shows how context dependent it is, yeah? Yeah, it would be. Stefan?
To go on, I totally agree with the relevance of what you're saying, and I think this is already in a fairly short time the second crisis situation that families are dealing with. And COVID was also, we would almost forget now, but I think it was also quite impactful on the narrative. So I think the narratives are changing, so there's not only the greater and the smaller narratives, but there's also something bigger. To totally change the way in which the narratives take place and redefine and look for redefinition.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the children who were like 1 or 2 years old or were born in the COVID time, the first years they didn't see their grandparents, they didn't cuddle with them, they didn't kiss them, yeah, so it's really...
They saw their parents much more.
Hmm?
They also saw their parents much more.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
They were family binding for the one who had small children, who was certainly very different.
Yeah.
My experience that during the first year, I was busy all the time home, when I wouldn't have been before, and having a young boy, I could see that it's a big difference.
Absolutely, yeah.
Compared to
Yeah.
the older one.
Yeah. Yeah, it already started in the maternity, yeah, that you could not have any visitors. So how relaxing it was for to not have to have all these people coming and visit you, yeah. It's just yeah.
There was another thing that was intriguing for me in what you presented. In the small story, they are less organized, they are more fragmented, they can be contradictory. And I was thinking, but this is really offering a lot of degree of freedom to the people within this family with this disorganized, fragmented story, because they can pick a little bit what they want.
Mm-hmm.
In the story, and they can strategically use certain aspect of it. If I take my own case, I was speaking about my military service day that I escaped being a conscientious objector. I'm coming from this type of working class family where it's kind of ideal would be to have a work as a state employee.
Yeah.
This was really the accomplishment. If I could have a work as a state employee, but actually...
Yeah, you are, yeah.
more railroad or something. This was a good pension.
Yeah. You succeeded in life, Pierre.
Your conscientious objective was threatened, but you would be denied any state employee.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of pressure on the way of my parents and certain person for me to abandon this idea of becoming a conscientious objector. But there were another story in the family, because my grandfather had lived a terrible story in captivity and threat of execution and all this during the war, and he was reservedly an anti-war person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could use this part, and he helped me a lot. He really helped me a lot to use this part of the family history and family storytelling in order to support my choice.
Yeah.
So, in this family where there are different things, we could strategically maybe use certain aspect of the history in order to do it my way.
Yeah. I do think so also this is very powerful in the the idea of do you give a diagnosis or not, yeah? Because this is also like giving someone a diagnosis of autism or ADHD or whatever, yeah, it's also a story, yeah? And there is some truth in it, but it's also, you can sometimes also argue against, you know, this kind of thing. I remember once a couple in London, I worked a few months in London, and he was a very good photographer. He had expositions all over the world and things like that. And his wife was a writer, but she never had written anything. She never finished a book. Yeah? But she was a writer, very creational, very creative and writer. In fact, she met all the points for manic depressive psychosis. Yeah, she was clearly bipolar. Yeah? But the framing, like you said, they strategically picked, yeah, and framed it as the very creative woman working on these novels. Yeah, she would never finish. Yeah? Made them an artistic couple. Yeah. And was their way, and we really struggled with, if you give her the diagnosis, the family would be ended, yeah, because this photographer could not live with a psychotic woman, yeah. But if you don't give the diagnosis, then you might not give her the help she might need, yeah. So I do think also in very different contexts, we do strategically pick and might decide for or against a diagnosis, picking the right or some elements out of a story. Yeah, I do think we do that all the time, and especially in identity forming. I think we pick just the things that fit our story, yeah, and ignore the others, or don't tell the others, or whatever. Yeah. But it's also very interesting. Would be very interesting to study and to ask people how they struggled to get the story told, or what helped them to, or why they go on with this story. One of the things that struck me when we worked with donor families, I think I said that last time, was we asked them in advance. They have also to do a compulsory information session with the psychologist, yeah? And then they are asked, will you be open about the donor conception or not? And so there is no correlation between what they say at that point and what they eventually do. So that for me also means that if you are thinking about this in a cognitive way, that people make rational decisions and then follow their own rationale, yeah, then you would expect that, but it's not true, because the story entails, and then of course the children have their own, they never ask questions, or they do ask questions, or they resemble the parents, or they don't resemble the parents. All kind of things happen there. And so how the story goes is unpredictable, which is also very interesting. Yeah? Like you said, we take elements out of reality, we scramble them together and make a story. But we might have taken other elements and be in a different. I remember that when I was in London, I had that feeling. I was alone with my oldest son, the biological son. He was 3, and I had this idea when I was in London that I was a different person. I was the same person, but other aspects of my identity came up. And I had a kind of idea I could have 7 different lives, yeah? Because I was single, having the son, I could move to the States. In our job, it's an opportunity to, and the idea that if you live somewhere else, surrounded by other people, you are another person, yeah? So you pick other aspects of... Actually, I talked to a boy last week who has a brother who was born as a sister. And he has a diagnosis of autism, and he asked me that if my brother would not have had these problems and all the problems it had in the family, because there were really a lot of fights and things like that, would I have been a different person? He asked me that. So, yeah. And it's also a dramatic change. If you have a sister and one day she says, I'm a brother, yeah, it's also, or for instance, if someone is diagnosed, one of the parents is diagnosed, or the children are diagnosed with cancer or something like that, yeah. It's also like a dramatic change in, yeah.
What you're working to are also opportunities to grow and evolve, like what you said, your experience in London, you said that maybe you can be someone else. And so that's also referring to the choice that you can make and take the responsibility of your own life and your own identity. And I think personally I've traveled around the world, and through every places and experience I got, I grew up differently, and that's part of me. But I also decided to go there and to resign from position, go somewhere else, even though that I had no opportunities at that time. But yeah, I mean, it's incredible sometimes. It's crazy how we can grow up in such ways and decide to say, okay, today I'm going somewhere, I'll be a different person, and I allow myself to meet other people.
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing like choice and control and agency, it's really, these are heavy concepts, I think, in this, also in your story, because I do think, like we said before, that there is the difference between you have the choice to travel, but being a boy in a female body, there's no choice, yeah? So there's one difference. Also, you live in a free country where you can travel, but then if you are living in a country with war, there is no choice, or you have to travel, because all the Ukrainian families who are coming here, they are different people than they were in Ukraine, yeah? So they are forced to be different here.
Referring to what Pierre says, that women have to leave with children. Actually, I saw a picture with a woman, a child, with in one hand and a Kalashnikov in the other hand. So she can fight as well and decide to stay. I don't know the scene behind and the context of this picture, but that's also again another choice that we can make.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is that for them coming here means that they will have different fragments of their story put together in a different story, yeah? It's really also, it's another topic, but it's really also hard to decide. I don't know here, but in Flanders we have this discussion now, do we want them to go to Flemish schools and learn Flemish, or do we want them to be in separate? Yeah, so the idea of we keep them in camps like they do with refugees, in refugee camps, and we send them back from the moment that it's safe there, or do we really want them to be part of our story too? Yeah? But that's a different topic. But
I think even when you don't go into the very crisis situations, I think changing families, like recompose families, or people who change partners, I suppose, and also can create totally different reality, and you can become a different person. So obviously now we see more crisis situations, and then the impact is much more subtle and much more tangible. But I think what seems also it's a normal life, it has become normal life, with serial monogamy and people getting different parts of their lives with different partners, different families, and I'm sure.
Yeah. Actually, I remember like 2 weeks ago, my oldest son is 28, and he doesn't have a partner at the time. He's a lawyer in Brussels. And I was sitting with my 3 boys, me and the 3 boys, and I said to them, look, you're the most important thing in my life. I'm so happy having you, being a mother and things like that. And certainly I realized he's 28, becoming 29. He doesn't have a partner. Maybe he doesn't want any children. And so I think, of course, I can understand, I said, that if you choose not to have children, that you can also have a very fulfilling life. Because I was really thinking about him being, and then he said, I cannot imagine that. If you don't have children, then your life is not, and it was like, whoo! So having a child is also something that really impacts you. And I think I can now say, I can imagine that I don't have children and that I had a good life. But that's, of course, because I have children. Yeah. But even that, yeah, having a child or not, or having that child, yeah, yeah. you don't choose your children, or having that parent. I mean, it's all impacting on us. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the question of the boy I was talking to 2 weeks ago, would I be another person? Would I have been another person when I wasn't a mother? I wasn't divorced, wasn't an adoptive mother, it's so identity is really, I think, central to I think Jan, you wrote something about that, you know, identity and so what do you think, how we will proceed with this? I mean, what do you like the most? That we have, next time we have another topic and we discuss that in the same way as we did now? Yep. That we always bring something new in and then discuss it like here? Yeah?
Yes, but also, I'm alone, I think it is an interesting topic about the crisis, about
Yeah.
about Ukraine, how crisis can affect the storytelling,
Yeah.
the identity formation in the family, and I would be curious to you know who I am. I am an experimental psychopathologist. Kind of a hooded person.
I know.
And I would be really curious to see how you would approach that methodologically.
How?
Question, how you would
Yeah.
build the question, gather data,
Yeah.
stories, analyze things,
I actually, Marine, who is behind you, she's one of my doctoral students, and her topic is blue psychology. Blue psychology is about all over the world where people who live close by the sea are happier and healthier than others. And it's a really interdisciplinary thing because the sea... It's a fantasy, no? It's all over the world, Marine, it's true. And so it's a combination of things. It has some biological things about good air, good food, yeah, lots of protein in the food, yeah. It has also something to do with health psychology in terms of you go out more. So you have the vitamin D, but you also have more exercise, yeah. Going out, you meet people more often than others, so you have more social interaction. And what Marine is really about is the idea of awe, being part of nature and things like that. Okay, but now about the methodology. In the lockdown, in Flanders, we had a lockdown. You had it here too, I think. In the first lockdown, we were not supposed to drive only when it... So we had a natural experiment of some people having access to the sea and some people who did not have access to the sea. We published that study showing that those who had access to the sea were happier in the lockdown than the others. And, if I have it right, Maureen, that the blue spaces had a more impact than the green spaces, because if you have access to a park or to, of course, it's also the balloon forest, for instance. But I only mentioned this on the methodological way because this, of course, your question is very important because here we had really like a natural experiment. What is happening now is also a natural experiment, but it's a nice question to think about how we would study that. Yeah? But of course, because I heard that there are 3 million people fled, so 3 million refugees now, but there's still like 40 million or something living there. So those who leave the country might be different people than those who don't leave the country. Yeah? So there might be a bias there also. And I'm also still wondering about your last question, Isabel. About this had something, because I ended my presentation, the last one, yes, with this one, let us be the voice of the lions. And then you said something about some, but I don't think I can really reconstruct it, but about some people, it's part of their identity, if I use the word identity, to be different from the norm, so that we don't have to fight for them, and that others who do not have the power or the agency to differ, although they want it. Was it something like that?
Yes, probably. I cannot reconstruct exactly what I said previously, but I had my notes, so I can...
Yeah, because I was really triggered by that, because like the story that I told, at the end was like, let us be the voice of the lions in the sense of let us give voice to all these different little stories and not only to the grand narrative of the same type of family studying over and over again. Yeah. So for me there was some logic in that, but then you challenged me really by saying, well, it was something like not all of these families need us to stand up for them, something like that. And I was very triggered by that. So maybe we can next time also give some voice to that. If you can reconstruct it for me, then we reconstruct it together. Yes, okay. So we do that. Next time we do something about refugees. Think about that further. Is it already time? Oh, yeah. Nice. Yeah, moment trainen. So thank you very much. Thank you.